In the beginning there was no doctrine, no theory, no formula. There was only the direct experience of being, a flicker of awareness in the boundless silence of existence. And within that silence, a question arose not from the mind, but from the very fabric of reality. Who am I? What is this? It was not Siddhartha's princely robes that made him noble. It was the fire in his heart, the refusal to accept the illusion of permanence. He saw the suffering in a blade of grass, the decay in a smile, the illusion in identity. And so he walked away from the noise of the palace and into the stillness of the forest. The Buddha did not arrive at truth through belief. He arrived through observation, through rigorous inner inquiry, through the science of the self. And unlike the scientists of modern laboratories who look outward through telescopes and microscopes, he turned the lens inward into the mind, the breath, the very heartbeat of impermanence. There he discovered what physicists would one day confirm, that all things arise and pass away, that the world is not made of things, but of processes, of interdependent events, dancing in a field of impermanence. This is not poetry. This is not metaphor. This is the heart of the Dogma and the pulse of quantum physics. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha declares, all phenomena are preceded by the mind, ruled by the mind, made of the mind. Over 2,000 years later, Einstein would echo, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And so we stand between two worlds, one clothed in saffron robes, the other in lab coats, and both whispering the same truth, that the universe is not made of solid, unchanging matter, but of relationships, vibrations, impermanence. You see, Buddhism is not a belief system. It is an investigative methodology. It begins with a hypothesis, there is suffering, and unfolds through observation, contemplation, and direct experience. Like a scientist formulating an experiment, the practitioner is instructed, observe your breath, examine your thoughts, trace the origin of desire, the cause of anger, the arising of craving. And like a true experiment, this inquiry does not demand belief. The Buddha never said, worship me. He said, come and see. Epasiko. His teachings are not commandments, but invitations to explore, to question, to verify. Modern science speaks of the observer effect, that the mere act of observing a phenomenon changes it. Buddhism knew this centuries ago. Sit in meditation, and the moment you observe anger, it shifts. Not through force, but through presence. You are no longer the anger, you are the space within which anger arises and dissolves. In The Quantum and the Lotus, astrophysicist Trin Tuan and Buddhist monk Mathieu Ricard converge on this very point. Quantum mechanics tells us that particles exist in probability states until observed. Buddhism tells us that self is an illusion until observed, and then even that vanishes. And who is the observer? Not the I that clings to identity, but the silent witness, the Vijnana consciousness, not bound by ego, but fluid like water, aware like the sky. Science describes entropy, the gradual return of systems to disorder. Buddhism describes anicca, impermanence, as the fundamental law. And so, when a relationship ends, when a body falls ill, when youth gives way to old age, the Buddhist does not ask, why me? He bows and says, this too is nature. There is no punishment, no sin, only causes and conditions. The law of karma is not mystical. It is causal. Plant a seed of anger, reap suffering. Plant a seed of compassion, reap peace. Just as gravity does not judge what falls, karma does not judge what ripens. It merely reflects what was sown. Tesla once said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And what is a mantra, if not a vibration that reshapes consciousness? What is mindfulness, if not the tuning of attention to the frequency of the now? The Dalai Lama in The Universe in a Single Atom writes, "If scientific analysis were to conclusively demonstrate certain claims in Buddhism to be false, then we must accept the findings of science and abandon those claims. What religion dares say such a thing? Only one that values truth over dogma, only one that is scientific in its very essence. And yet, Buddhism goes further than science dares. Where science ends at matter, Buddhism enters the mind. Where physics maps the cosmos, Buddhism charts the inner universe. For what use is it to understand the galaxies if one cannot understand sorrow? What value is there in splitting atoms if one cannot unify a divided heart? In the laboratory of the self, Buddhism is the microscope, the method, and the mirror. There is no final theory, no holy book immune to revision. The only scripture that matters is the one written on the breath. The only experiment worth pursuing is this: can I be free? Can I awake? And so the Buddha sits, not in temples alone, but in neurons firing with attention, in the silence between thoughts, in the compassionate gaze of a being who sees not form, but into being. What is into being? It is the understanding that there is no separate self, that the cloud becomes the rain, becomes the river, becomes the tea in your cup. That you are not you alone, you are also your ancestors, the air you breathe, the sun that ripens your food. You are a wave in the ocean of existence, inseparable from the whole. This is not mysticism. This is ecological truth. This is systems theory. This is thermodynamics. And this is the Dhamma. When we see deeply, we do not see a tree. We see water, sunlight, carbon dioxide, soil, mycelium, bird droppings, forgotten seeds. When we see deeply, we do not see a person. We see stories, traumas, karma, genetics, culture. And when we look even deeper, we see there is no solid self. There is only process. Consciousness, flickering like a flame, moment to moment. This is why Buddhism is not a dogma, but a revolution. Not in politics, in perception. A shift from I am to there is awareness. From this is mine to this arises. From I know to let me see. This is not passivity. It is precision. Not withdrawal, but wisdom. And from that wisdom arises compassion. Not as an emotion, but as a natural response to the interwoven nature of life. To harm you is to harm myself. To liberate myself is to liberate the world. And so the Buddha smiles, not because he is distant, but because he is here, fully. Not above you, but within you. A mind free from delusion is the greatest experiment of all. A heart without hate is the highest technology. A moment of stillness is the true Big Bang, from which love, clarity, and presence erupt like galaxies across the soul. The Buddha did not conquer lands. He conquered illusion. He did not offer commandments. He offered tools. He did not demand worship. He invited inquiry, and in doing so he bridged the ancient and the modern, the spiritual and the scientific, the breath and the cosmos. He did not say, believe. He said, awaken. And the question is not whether Buddhism is the pinnacle of science. The question is, are you willing to become the scientist of your own suffering? Are you willing to truly look into the nature of your own mind? For in that seeing, there is no need to believe. There is only knowing. The scientist in the laboratory places an object under the lens, analyzes its structure, and deduces its function. But the meditator in the forest does something far more radical. They place the self under observation. They turn attention inward, and they begin to ask the most dangerous question of all: what am I without my thoughts? And so the experiment begins. The breath is the first subject, rising, falling, fleeting. The mind tries to chase it, control it, claim it. But the Buddha taught, do not interfere. Just observe. Like a physicist watching particles appear and disappear in a vacuum, the meditator watches sensations rise and fade in the body, tension in the jaw, flutter in the chest, restlessness in the legs. This is not self. This is sensation. This is not sin. This is not you. This is impermanent. In the words of the Dhammapada, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. That turning is not dramatic. It is subtle. It is the shift from clinging to curiosity, from resistance to observation, from panic to presence. When a scientist accepts uncertainty, they gain clarity. When a seeker accepts impermanence, they gain peace. Every morning, trillions of atoms shift position, and stars are born across the vacuum of space. But what of the universe inside you? What galaxies spin within the chambers of your heart? What forgotten worlds sleep in your nervous system? What karmic black holes pull at your patterns, your cravings, your fears? It is here that Buddhism becomes the pinnacle of science, not in what it knows, but in how it asks, not in answers, but in awareness. The Buddha did not awaken by accumulating knowledge. He awakened by subtracting illusion. He let go of all identities, beliefs, attachments, until what remained was not Siddhartha but spacious, luminous awareness. Pavasara Chitta, the radiant mind, a mind like the clear sky, empty of clouds, yet capable of holding all weather. Compare this with the scientist who peels away layers of assumptions, refines hypotheses, discards what doesn't match reality. It is a process of purification. And in this purification, insight arises, not from belief, but from seeing. In the universe in a single atom, the Dalai Lama writes, at its best, science is open to continual self-correction, responsive to new evidence, and willing to give up cherished notions. In this way, it shares much with Buddhism. Imagine that religion and science, both anchored not in certainty but in humility. And what greater humility is there than silence? The silence of a monk under a Bodhi tree. The silence of a scientist alone in a lab, staring into the dark. Both know that the greatest truths cannot be shouted, they must be felt. Tesla believed that the world is not a collection of separate objects, but a field of energy. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, he said, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. And is that not what the Buddha did? He studied craving. He studied identity. He studied suffering not as a moral flaw, but as a phenomenon with causes and conditions. He diagnosed the mind the way a biologist diagnoses a body, and he offered a treatment not faith, but practice. The Eightfold Path is not a doctrine, it is a system, a technology, a sequence of operations that, when followed, rewire the mind. Right view is the calibration of perception. Right intention is the alignment of trajectory. Right speech is the tuning of communication. Right action is behavioral design. Right livelihood is ethical sustainability. Right effort is neural conditioning. Right mindfulness is the observational tool. Right concentration is quantum focus. Tell me, what scientific method has more integrity than this? In the brain of a seasoned meditator, neuroscientists observe something extraordinary: enhanced activity in the prefrontal cortex, reduced reactivity in the amygdala, synchronization of brainwaves across regions. The default mode network, the seat of egoic narrative, goes quiet. The self disappears, and with it, the illusion of separateness. Just as quantum entanglement shows that particles separated by light years still influence each other instantaneously, Buddhism reveals that what you do to another, you do to yourself. The monk sitting in stillness is not retreating from the world. He is entering its very source. He sees that suffering is not out there. It is the interpretation. It is the grasping. It is the story we overlay upon what is. Remove the story, and reality remains. Pure, vibrant, undistorted. This is not detachment. It is liberation from distortion, from illusion, from identification with the transient. And in that freedom, something astonishing occurs. The heart awakens. Not in sentimentality, but in sacred responsibility. Because when you see clearly, you can no longer turn away. You see the child in the refugee, the fear in the aggressor, the trauma in the tyrant, the Buddha in the beggar. You see not roles but consciousness, caught in patterns. And that changes everything. The scientific mind seeks understanding. The Buddhist mind seeks freedom. But they are not opposed. They are parallel paths, up the same mountain. And at the summit, they meet. Einstein said, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger is as good as dead." The Buddha said, "A mind unshaken by the vicissitudes of life, sorrowless, stainless and secure, this is the highest blessing." Both speak of the same awakening. To be alive to the mystery, to be grounded in truth, to dissolve the illusion of control and merge with the unfolding. This is not mysticism. This is not belief. This is what you see when the mirror of the mind is polished and what is reflected is not self, but reality. To live without distortion, to love without grasping, to think without clinging, to move without fear. This is what science dreams of and what Buddhism practices. One seeks to understand the world. The other seeks to understand the one who sees the world. But in the end, they are one. The cosmos within, the cosmos without. And the bridge? Awareness, still, open, luminous. You are not a name, not a role, not a history. You are the witness of it all. And to return to that witness is the greatest experiment you will ever undertake. To walk the path, not of belief but of being. To strip away every layer that is not true until what remains is empty and full, silent and infinite. That is the Dogma. That is science. That is you. When the Buddha spoke of dukkha, suffering, he wasn't simply speaking of pain or misfortune. He was naming a fundamental misalignment with reality, a tension in the soul, like a machine running against its own design, like the hum of a string out of tune. And what causes this dissonance? It is the clinging to what cannot be held, the desire to freeze what is in motion, the craving to make permanent what is ever-changing. A scientist builds models of the world. So does the ego, but both must be updated when new data emerges. The difference? The scientist welcomes revision. The ego resists it. The path of awakening is to become like the scientist, humble in the face of evidence, relentless in the search for truth. When we meditate, we are not escaping the world. We are entering it more deeply, tuning our instruments, refining our perception. We begin to notice subtleties we had ignored, the tension before a thought arises, the ripple of emotion in a word, the slight contraction of the heart when judgment appears. This is where the real data lies, not in books but in the breath, not in equations but in sensations, not in conclusions but in presence. And when presence deepens, something miraculous begins to happen. A clarity unfolds. The illusion of separateness begins to dissolve. What you once called me becomes transparent. What you once called mine becomes ungraspable. The Buddha called this anatta, non-self. Not as a denial of existence, but as an invitation to release the tightness around identity. You are not the narrative. You are the space in which the narrative arises. Modern neuroscience now supports this. The self we think we are is not located in one place. It is a network of processes, memory, attention, body awareness, constantly constructing an experience of I. But this I is not solid. It flickers. It vanishes when not observed. Buddhism knew this all along. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha compares the self to a chariot. We say chariot, but what we're referring to is an assembly of parts: wheels, axles, frame. Remove the parts, and where is the chariot? Likewise, remove sensation, perception, thought, consciousness, and where is the self? This insight is not nihilism. It is freedom. For if there is no fixed self, then there is no fixed fate. You can change. You can evolve. You can awaken. This is the heart of both Buddhism and science. The universe is not a prison. It is a process, a dance, a field of infinite potential. And the more clearly you see, the more skillfully you can move. The physicist Fritjof Capra wrote in the Tao of Physics, "The basic oneness of the universe is not only the central characteristic of the mystical experience, but also of modern physics. This oneness is not theoretical, it is experiential. When you sit in deep stillness, when the chatter of the mind fades, and all that remains is awareness itself, you do not feel alone. You feel connected, not as a thought, but as a truth, not as a concept, but as a vibration in your very cells." It is the same experience astronauts describe when they look at Earth from space, a sudden, overwhelming realization of interconnection. Borders vanish. Nations disappear. There is only one planet, one breath, one being. The Buddha reached this state under the Bodhi tree. Einstein reached it under the night sky. Tesla reached it in silence. And you reach it each time you become fully present. No past, no future, just now. And in that now, you are not a separate observer. You are the unfolding itself. You are not thinking the thought. You are the space in which the thought arises. You are not the body aging. You are the awareness witnessing change. You are not even the breath. You are the stillness between the inhale and the exhale. What science calls energy, Buddhism calls paticca samuppada, dependent origination. Nothing exists independently. Everything arises based on conditions. You are not you because of one cause. You are the convergence of biology, karma, memory, sunlight, breath, and mystery. You are a pattern within patterns, a wave within waves, a node of awareness in an infinite web. And here lies the great paradox. You matter infinitely, and you are not the center. Both are true, because your liberation liberates others. Your presence creates ripples, your silence becomes refuge, your kindness becomes science, applied to the human heart. What is compassion, if not a technology of healing? What is mindfulness, if not a tool for mental clarity? What is awakening, if not a quantum shift in perception? This is why Buddhism is not in conflict with science. It is its completion. Science reveals the mechanism. Buddhism reveals the meaning. Science dissects. Buddhism integrates. But when they meet, oh, when they meet, they birth something sacred. The physicist bows to mystery. The monk bows to matter, and both weep with awe. The same awe a child feels when seeing snow for the first time. The same awe you feel when a moment of silence fills you with peace, so vast it erases every question. That awe is not weakness. It is the beginning of true understanding. It is where the mind ends and wisdom begins. And from that wisdom, action arises, not reactive, but intentional. Because when you see the world clearly, you no longer seek to dominate it. You seek to serve it. You speak less. You listen more. You own less. You share more. You cling less. You love more. And this is the ultimate science. Not of atoms, but of awakening. Not of force, but of freedom. Not of knowledge, but of knowing. The knowing that nothing belongs to you, and yet everything is you. The knowing that to awaken is not to escape the world, but to embrace it fully with open eyes, open heart, open hands. This is why the Buddha smiled. Not because life is without sorrow, but because life is inseparable from wisdom. And wisdom is always here, waiting, like the stillness behind sound, like the sky behind clouds, like the silence between your thoughts. All you have to do is look, not with the eyes, but with awareness, not to believe, but to see, and in that seeing, science and spirit become one. In that seeing, you return not to an idea, but to yourself, to what you've always been, to what the Buddha saw, to what Einstein glimpsed, to what the Dharma reveals. Stillness, clarity, interconnection, truth. When the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, he was not seeking escape. He was seeking reality. Not a divine revelation, but direct perception. Not salvation, but understanding. And what he discovered was not mystical. It was profoundly simple. That everything changes. That nothing arises without cause. That suffering is not punishment. It is the natural result of misunderstanding reality. And liberation, it is not granted from above. It is realized from within. To awaken is not to become something more. It is to see things as they truly are. It is to recognize that form is emptiness, and emptiness is not void, but fullness. The womb of possibility, the matrix of interbeing. The more science progresses, the more it corroborates what the sages of old have always known, that the universe is not a machine, but a mystery, not dead matter, but living presence. Quantum physicists now speak of the vacuum as seething with potential energy. The Buddhists have always spoken of shunyata, emptiness, that is not nothingness, but fertile space in which all things arise and pass. The more deeply we study consciousness, the more elusive it becomes. We can track neurons firing, map brain states, identify correlations, but who truly is aware? What is the substance of knowing? What is the color of presence? Science may measure brain waves, but it cannot yet bottle a moment of stillness. It may analyze compassion, but it cannot manufacture the grace of a silent act of kindness. And yet, when science is honest, it kneels. It recognizes its own limits, and in that kneeling, it becomes sacred. For the ultimate purpose of inquiry is not control. It is reverence, not manipulation, but alignment. To align with the rhythms of life. To honor the laws of cause and effect, not as cold mechanisms, but as sacred threads in the tapestry of being. And this is where Buddhism excels, not in explaining reality, but in harmonizing with it. Not in predicting the future, but in being fully present to the now. Not in clinging to models, but in adapting with humility and grace. This is the adaptability of the awakened mind. Like water, it takes the shape of the moment. Like the wind, it moves where needed. Like space, it holds all things and clings to none. Discipline in Buddhism is not rigid control. It is gentle constancy. It is the art of returning again and again to presence, to clarity, to kindness. Like the scientist who repeats the experiment 1,000 times, not to force the result, but to understand it deeply. The practitioner returns to the cushion, to the breath, to the moment. Every sunrise is a new hypothesis. Every breath, a new observation. Every mistake, a new data point. There is no failure, only refinement, only learning. And what is learned is not information but transformation. the transformation of a mind from chaos to clarity, from greed to generosity, from fear to freedom. This is why Buddhism is not only compatible with science, it is its flowering. Because while science shows us how the world works, Buddhism shows us how to live within it, how to be kind amidst entropy, how to be wise amidst uncertainty, how to be still amidst acceleration, how to be whole amidst fragmentation. The Buddha did not speak in equations, but in parables. Yet every teaching contains a universe. When he spoke of a candle lighting another without losing its flame, he was describing thermodynamics and compassion in one breath. When he taught that hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love, he was revealing the emotional mechanics of neuroplasticity and social resonance. When he declared that the mind is everything and what you think, you become, he was describing the self-fulfilling feedback loop of perception and biology. When he instructed us to walk mindfully, to breathe consciously, to speak truthfully, he was not moralizing. He was offering the algorithm of awakening. And this algorithm does not require belief. It requires courage. The courage to sit with discomfort, to observe rather than react, to inquire rather than assume, to release rather than grasp, to love rather than defend. And in that courage, a new science is born. Not in labs, but in hearts. Not in theories, but in presence. A science of being. A physics of presence. A cosmology of compassion. This is the path of the Buddha. This is the path of the awakened one. This is your path, and now you stand at the edge of your known world, the edge of your old identity, the edge of the map where belief ends and truth begins. You have listened, you have felt the resonance, and now you are called not to worship, but to walk, not to cling, but to explore, not to escape, but to embody, because the laboratory is your breath, the microscope is your attention, the data is your suffering, and the discovery is your liberation. So ask not whether Buddhism is science. Ask, are you willing to conduct the experiment? Are you willing to turn inward, not to escape, but to understand? Are you willing to dissolve the illusion not with force, but with awareness? Are you willing to see? Because when you do, when the veil lifts, even for a moment, you will not need anyone to tell you what is true. You will know, not with the mind, but with the marrow of your being. And that knowing will not separate you from the world. It will unite you with all things. You will walk through this life, not as a seeker but as a presence. Not as a knower, but as an open question. Not as a name, but as awareness itself. Still, unbound, awake. Welcome home.